There is a significant difference between guiding and directing, with the former characterized by suggesting and the latter by demanding. Certainly, this has been somewhat obvious, or should be, throughout this present pandemic, as our public health authorities have given guidance to people to try to help them remain safe and to mitigate the spread of this coronavirus. But as emphatically as they may have urged compliance at times with their suggestions, it was left largely to the receptivity and goodwill of the hearers to comply. Indeed, while demanding usually has defined punitive consequences for not complying, that is less likely the case with guiding. So we see that to be true in this pandemic, insofar as our courts and jails certainly have not been filled with people convicted and incarcerated because they hosted a large party or went to a spring break bash unmasked and not too safely distanced. However, that does not mean that there aren't any possible consequences for choosing to deny or defy sound guidance given by those who, we must concede, do clearly know better than we do about these matters. So, though the consequences are not generally of the legal sort, the unfavorable results of what amounts to an assertion of autonomy and an ignorance of the truth have been well attested by the skyrocketing numbers of those who either ended up seriously ill in hospitals or sadly still deceased in morgues. Though tragic, this recent experience with the pandemic can, in an analogous way, shed some light on Jesus and who he is and how he chooses to lead and what response would be wise to make in terms of what he is inviting us to do. Jesus identifies himself as the Good Shepherd, not the demanding dictator or the eternal enforcer. His shepherding is characterized by gentle guidance. He invites us to follow him. He does not demand it. Yet we are unlikely to accept his invitation unless we have the genuine humility to recognize Jesus as knowing infinitely more than we know, not just about some subjects or situations, but in fact about everything, but most especially about that which is of ultimate importance: love, truth, goodness, justice, mercy, all things essential to our life, to our well-being and our happiness, not only for time, but for eternity. Jesus is inviting us to that kingdom he came to announce and inaugurate, an eternal kingdom of light, joy, and peace, to which any would be foolish not to accept the invitation. And most do say, hey, they want to get there. But the hitch is that this is a kingdom that requires us to try to live as its citizens, even right here and now, in order that we might one day enter it, because otherwise we just wouldn't be able to fit in there hereafter. The culture of that kingdom is one of generosity rather than greed, of mercy much more than judgment, of empathy and compassion rather than apathy, of self-sacrifice over self-concern, a place where we will always be vastly more important than me. That kingdom is pervaded by perfect love and mercy, such that within it there can be no trace of hatred or of violence, whether in speech or in action. Indeed, it is a kingdom obviously so vastly different than the world at large in which we presently find ourselves living. The most direct way to that kingdom is, of course, by answering that invitation of Jesus to follow him, accepting him as our shepherd, and striving to live as he instructs us by his own gospel word and by his example. Yet that all too human and frighteningly more and more pervasive attitude of no one is going to tell me what to do, which reflects a terribly exaggerated notion of our autonomy as human beings, prevents many from following any but their own voice, never mind that of a soft-spoken, gentle shepherd who many mistakenly relegate to the past. Yes, people insisting that they need not listen or answer to anyone but themselves are at the root not only of behavior that may presently impede progress in eradicating this pandemic, but also of so much else in our world that is erroneous, dangerous, ugly, and outrightly evil. Such an attitude is completely incompatible with discipleship, and the more prevalent that attitude becomes, not surprisingly, the more we seem to be living in hell on earth, as proven by such disturbing news that so often comes our way. Yet, we must realize, as part of the flock of Christ, that we can be part of the realm of light rather than that of darkness, so long as we remain devoted to an ongoing struggle, first and foremost, with no one other than ourselves, vigilantly making the effort to overcome our human pride, and finding that genuine humility to admit that we are sheep, called more often to follow than to lead, because the truth is, we aren't our own best boss. Today, we truly realize we need that wise guidance, that loving instruction, so gently given, but perilously ignored by that one shepherd who is truly good. That is, if we want to get where we would ultimately want to go, which is heaven. But in the meantime, let us be confident that as often as we do overcome our own will and our own wants in order to follow his way, we will be bringing some measure of joy, no matter how small, to this vale of tears, revealing a glimpse, no matter how fleeting, of the light and peace of that kingdom which is destined to succeed all those kingdoms of this troubled world.